Hello and welcome to Young Turks Reloaded. I'm Shereen Bhan. This is a platform where we bring you deep conversation on where we currently are as a country, but more importantly, on the issues that we need to focus on. Young Turks was really about what this country could achieve in terms of aspiration, how dreams could be fulfilled for first-generation entrepreneurs. Joining me on the program today are two individuals who've done exactly that. One has been on Young Turks many years ago. Ashish, it's great to have you back. And Pramath, thank you very much for joining us here today. Let me start by talking to you about the big shift and the big change that we've seen in terms of aspiration, in terms of expectations, in terms of hopes and dreams of what this country can be. And Ashish, I want to take you back to the 90s, which is when you decided to bet on India and decided to come back to India, first to start private equity with Chris Capital, and then of course 10 years ago with Ashoka University. You've always been a firm believer in the India story, contrarian somewhat as well. As you look back at the last 20 years, what would you qualify as the single biggest shift and the single biggest change?
So I think the biggest shift has been in our aspirations. When I started with a small private equity fund, we weren't even sure if we could generate returns in India.
You weren't even sure if you would get money to start with.
Raise money was hard.
Yeah.
Today, look at the capital that's available, whether it's private equity, venture capital, infrastructure, real estate, it's exploded. I think the same is true in higher education now, where when we first dreamt of Ashoka, we had no idea that students from 40 countries would be applying to our university, that out of the 3,000 students today, they come from 400 towns and cities. So our aspiration early on was to build a good university in India, the best. Now our aspiration is, why shouldn't it be one of the best in the world? So I think it's about aspirations,
Speaking of aspirations and going from being one of India's best or India's best university to competing against global universities. And Pramath, I want to talk to you about that aspiration. But before we talk about the future, let's talk about the past as well. Because, you were part of that startup founding list of team members that put their heads together. And what about a dozen of you, from Chip K to Ashish to yourself, Sanjeev Bhikchandani and many others. Did you think it was going to be possible? We've had philanthropy linked to education in India. We've had business families engage and interact with institutions and set up institutions as well. But did you think that it was going to be possible for you to be able to deliver on the promise of something like Ashoka in 2010?
Well, like all entrepreneurs, you have to believe passionately and be positive that it will work out. I think in our case, and mainly the reason I got involved was the success of ISB. I think we underestimated the challenges, if you ask me. I think we were very positive about where we would reach.
I guess that's what entrepreneurship is about, right? You have to have that belief and optimism, and that helps you at least gloss over the challenges that and are certain you will encounter. But Ashish, coming back to that, to that starting phase of reaching out to Pramath, of putting together this group of very diverse individuals. And this takes me back to a conversation that I remember having with Mr. Murthy about starting Infosys. And I said, like 7 of you, of course, he was the first among equals, but I said, how did you get a decision made? Because, and especially we are known as argumentative Indians for a particular reason. What was that like? And he told me, he said, look, it was very simple. We had a sort of unwritten rule that in God we trust, everybody else brings data to the table. What was it like for you?
So we started with a smaller group. As Pramath was saying, Sanjeev, Pramath, myself, only a couple of others. It was a small group. And I think we spent a lot of time. So even as a precursor, we used to meet one Saturday a month at my old office, and we would have conversations. And this happened for a couple of years. So I think that helps with alignment. And then ultimately we said, we want to build a liberal arts and sciences, an interdisciplinary university. So everybody was aligned. This was going to be
and some people did get off the ship.
Yeah, because some people wanted something else. So we were very clear that Indian higher ed had become too specialized, that we needed a new institution that really provided breadth and depth, that was interdisciplinary and holistic, and that gave students choice. So we agreed on the principles. We agreed on some of the the disciplines we would cover and what we wouldn't cover. And we also said that we have to hire the best in the world to come, and the pedagogy has to be exciting. We'll primarily be undergraduate to start with.
Right.
And then over time, we'll build out a very strong PhD program. We won't have a very big master's program. So I think we spent a lot of time, so we were aligned on what the broader purpose is, the vision, broadly what the strategy is. And then we were able to bring in many other people. So we also had a governance model where we said, even if you put in a lot of money, you still have one vote. And you operate through...
How did that conversation go?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on, Sanjeev and I were initially the two largest contributors. And we'd said, we are going to do this. So it just became the norm. And we just went to everybody. When actually there was someone who wanted to put a lot of money in, wanted more than one vote, we turned that person down. So it's just a principle you stick to as you build it out. But we never realized when we started that we could end up becoming the largest, we think, collective philanthropy project in India.
Right.
We've raised about 3,500 crores, Shereen, in pure philanthropic money. We've had people like HDFC Group to Axis Bank to the Bajaj Group support Ashoka at scale. Individuals, R.K. Damani, Mr. Jhunjhunwala, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, many others have contributed. 200 founders have contributed towards building this institution because they believe it's an important project for the country, that India needs a new institution. That's a new form of education for India.
You talked about how one of the driving ideas of Ashoka was to ensure that you bring world-class faculty to India. A lot of the people that you have at Ashoka have decided to come back, have decided to move back to India and build their careers here. How challenging was that?
That is the most challenging.
And continues to be so?
And will always be for us. Because there's tremendous student demand on the back of the aspirations that Ashish talked about. Philanthropy has really taken off, and we've done a good job of bringing people together to fund the institution. And you can create infrastructure world-class in India. So that all of those elements are in place. But really the key is getting faculty to come and teach here. A couple of interesting things are happening. Higher education around the world is actually going through a very tumultuous time, mainly because of technology, but also because of the demographic cliff that you're seeing in the West. So the opportunities for high quality faculty academic positions are drying up. And so a lot of people, both Indian and non-Indians, are looking for opportunities.
So is it becoming easier today then?
It is easier, but it's still hard to convince them to come to Sonipat and live there.
That is true.
But the fact that we're right next to Delhi makes it
So the Delhi
makes it very attractive.
So the Delhi location really helps us. Delhi is a happening place from that perspective. But I think we always understood what our faculty really looking for. It's not just money. It's the support for their scholarship, their research, and access to high quality students. So these are some of the nuanced benefits that you provide in the world of academia to be able to support people so that they can freely pursue free thought and research. And so that's the real attraction, that we are the best option for anyone wanting to do high quality scholarly academic work in India. And we want to be always able to say that.
And that brings me to an important point that Pramath raised, and I want to get you to build on that, Ashish. What is the Ashoka differentiator? As I said, corporate engagement with education is not new to this country. Sure. Philanthropic engagement with education is again not new to this country. What is the big differentiator for Ashoka today as you see it?
So I think it still is the fact that we are truly interdisciplinary. These disciplinary boundaries are starting to blur. So I'll give you examples. Like, for instance, a lot of people don't know this, but we're very strong in the sciences and computer science, in addition to humanities and social science, right? So we were able to attract some very good people initially, humanities, social science. If you ask me in the sciences, why do people get attracted to Ashoka? So Dr. Vijay Raghavan, who is the principal scientific advisor, he joined as the chair of our Science Council. He's been helping us build the sciences. He feels that science now, cutting edge science, is truly interdisciplinary. if you're doing computer science, these days it's no longer about computer science. Look at MIT's computer science. It's CS plus X. That plus X you don't get at other places. So I think that is the big differentiator. This interdisciplinarity, the holistic education, this energy of the bright student who is curious and doesn't want to get confined to narrow boundaries. That's the paradigm shift that Ashoka has made.
And speaking of that paradigm shift, because I think that puts in place a larger question that people are grappling with today as we enter an AI-driven world, an AI-led world. The questions being asked, what does the current education system provide? Is it relevant today? What will the education system of the future need to be? When you talk about this X+, what are we talking about, Pramath? And do you believe that, the system that exists today is really going to be able to deliver on the needs, the skills that the future asks of us?
I think we thought very carefully about these skills when we set up Ashoka. And I think the choice of the liberal education model was really to feed into exactly the skills that will be required in the future. So AI will do what it will, but you still have to know what data to train AI on. You still have to know what questions to ask, this whole area of framing. And AI will continue to evolve, so you have to continue to be a lifelong learner to be able to keep up with the changes that are taking place. So if you play that back, we have always believed that critical thinking, the ability to logically and do evidence-based thinking and then be able to problem solve is a core skill that you will always need. That communication, being able to engage with each other. Yes, you can get ChatGPT to clean up your memo, but ultimately, when we are talking right now, we don't have the
there's
AI.
no ChatGPT.
Yes. So you need to think on your feet. You need to be able to negotiate, engage, influence, have difficult conversations. So communication skills and collaboration skills, the interdisciplinarity basically means that people have to talk across disciplines. And so what we are trying to do here also is to build those skills that people can actually work with each other across disciplines when they come from Mars and Earth, right? We see Ashoka's mission to really be able to serve the country in solving these problems with the cadre of young people that we are feeding into the workplace.
And that gives me the perfect segue to go back to the Ashoka mission of nation building, Ashish. And one of the important aspects that I know you firmly believed in was that this must be an institute that's also inclusive. And I want to build a little bit on that and what the effort is in order for you to be able to do that. You talked about the diversity of the students coming in from different parts of the world and, of course, different parts of the country as well. But providing access of good quality education to children who cannot afford it. I know you run a pretty large scholarship program as well. Over 500 crore rupees over the last several years have been given out as scholarships to students. Build on that for me. I mean, how important is that and how do you see that shaping up in the future?
Yeah, so Shereen, we are perceived as being elite. I think that's largely because we do get very good students and some of them from the very best schools who often had the choice to go abroad. So I do think we're serving the country in one way, which is we're preventing the dollars from going outside. And we're finally showing that it's possible for students to get a great education in India. And we hope many others do the same, right? This 10 billion going abroad can be stemmed. That's one part. I think a second part with regards to inclusion is we were always committed to this idea that we are here to get the best students irregardless. And so therefore, from the get-go, we wanted diversity, we wanted to be inclusive. As you said, we've given away actually 600 plus crore in scholarships, 100 crore alone this year. If you look at the total number of students we've had so far, 59% have been on some form of financial aid. So yes, granted, there are 40+% who paid full fees, but 59% on some form of financial aid. Over 2,000 students have been on full financial aid so far. So the numbers are quite staggering. And, we have more than half our students are women. Again, people have this perception Ashoka only gets kids from Delhi and Bombay and Bangalore and Pune. It's not true. It's from small towns all over India. From Kottayam, from Guwahati, from Dibrugarh, all over India, these students are coming.
How do you change this narrative and this perception? I mean, of course, you can't control it, but does that sometimes bother the two of you?
Certainly does. We try the usual, ways, like coming to you and talking about it. But we have a very large outreach effort, which we target. Think of them as the feeder schools to these programs. So, for example, the Navodaya schools in the country, as you know, there are some 600 of these schools where the government provides free education to the best students in a district. We have a tremendous outreach to them, and ultimately what works is word of mouth. So what happens is one Navodaya student comes and then they go back and then they become alumni.
But are you consciously also changing the outreach to include
yes,
more?
Of course.
Yeah,
of course. Yes. Of course. There's a massive effort to do that.
We go to Navodayas actually to pitch the idea of Ashoka. We're now working with a few state governments to say, tell us who your top students are, and let them know that there's scholarships on offer. Send us. We can't just blindly take them, but we want more of them to apply.
The lessons from the private equity world, where you really began your India foray, and where you stand today with education and trying to build an institution of excellence. Beyond patience and patient capital, what have you been able to take from the private equity world to education?
I think a lot. I mean, at the end of the day, building any enterprise, whether it's an academic institution or a corporate enterprise, similar. The differences are as follows. I think one is you need to be much more long-term oriented. Universities, to build an excellent institution, is a 25, 30-year journey. I think a second is universities are noisy places. We are committed to India, but
are you committed to them being noisy?
Of course we are.
Because that's another criticism as well.
No, of course we are. And there have been small blips along the way. But I think staying the course, because we know in our heart of hearts, what we're doing is we are focused on good teaching and good research, which is the crux of a good institution. And the third thing I would say is quality, quality, quality at all costs.
Maintain the quality bar and in fact try to, not allow it to go down, but keep improving on it. That has a cost to it, which is then supported by philanthropy. So in our case, the flywheel moves almost opposite to what it does in a revenue generating model.
For corporate people, they always think, there's a market, why can't for-profit institutions be the best? But if you look globally at the top 200 universities in the world, all of them are non-profit. All of them. It's precisely this. It's the patient. You won't focus on research. If you want to maximize EBITDA, you'll be a teaching shop. You'll ignore, why would you run a PhD program? It's pure cost, no revenue. Right?
So how do you look at ROI then as far as Ashoka is concerned?
It's impact. Totally. And one shouldn't be focused on these near-term metrics alone. Obviously, we look at metrics internally, but I think those are very myopic. One has to have a longer-term perspective and be very focused on governance. One of the things we came up with, which I think ISB pioneered in India, was this governance model where donors become board members, trustees, governing body members, etc., early on, but nobody has an infinite term. Nobody's kith or kin, children get involved, spouses get involved. We eventually will term out, and alumni, once they have matured, will take our place as trustees and as governing body members. So this idea of a collective, we have no owner. There's no one family that backs this place. It's really, if you look at Harvard, who's the owner of Harvard? It's named after John Harvard. Who's the owner of Oxford? Universities are creatures that are almost public-private. You need this sort of thing where the academics play a very important role. They're the superstars. And then this governance model, which is not controlled by one person.
My final question, Ashish, and this is more philosophical, to be deeply passionate about something, to take it forward, to take it through, like Ashoka, which in itself is a startup, but also have the ability to let go. And that's not easy to do. It's a challenge that many people have failed at achieving. How do you deal with that? What's been the lesson there?
Yeah, for me, I always believed in this sort of nishkam karma, which is you just work without the expectation of reward, and this attached detachment. You know, you when you're passionate, you're close, but ultimately the strength of something, your true test is when you can let go. Because that means you build something that can outlive you, right? So to be attached, but yet at the same time to be a little bit aloof, to be able to look at it from a distance. It allows you to be critical, to help the place improve, also allows you to let go at some point. I mean, I did that in private equity and moved on. And I think the same is here. Ultimately, we could get hit by a bus tomorrow, you know? So, and the institution. So none of us are so great. So I think first is recognition is that there are many other people who can do what we do. But more importantly, it's healthy when you're building an institution to be able to slowly fade away and ultimately not exist.
Well, that's the perfect note to end this conversation on. But of course, the journey continues for the two of you and for Ashoka and all your other donors and founders. We wish you the very best of luck as you take forward the next decade. And we hope that we see you in all of those rankings and lists that you just spoke of. And really, we hope that this does trigger that movement of creating more institutes, more colleges and universities that deliver on the quality of education that this country requires and needs. Ashish, Pramath, many, many thanks for joining us. Well, that's it then on this edition of Young Turks Reloaded. From all of us here on the team, for now, goodbye. Thanks for watching. Do stay tuned to CNBC TV18. We're back in a moment with more.